Welcome to the Crime Redefined podcast, produced by Zero Cliff Media. Coming to you from the US Bank Tower, high above downtown Los Angeles. In our podcast, we drill deep into forensics and criminal investigation from the viewpoint of the defense, as well as explore the intersection of the media and the justice system.
Thank you for listening to Crime Redefined. I'm co-host Mehul Anjaria. We now present the conclusion of our very special interview with Jane Dorotik, and afterwards, Dion and I will share our thoughts. Enjoy.
Did you get some kind of a probably the wrong word, but like a little bit of a rock star status in there of being able, you've helped out, 40 plus people. You were kind of like a legend inside there? Hey, go see Jane, go see Jane.
Yeah, that did happen somewhat there. People would say, and unfortunately they would think it translated into anything else. And I mean, this was just one little thing that I found and was able to be effective with, but it made it difficult because women would come in and say, please, can you write a writ for me? Can you do this? Can you do that? And, I would help anyone as best I could, but I wasn't legally trained and so forth. And so it was tough. I saw so many women that could benefit from good legal help. So many women that were over-sentenced. And, I've said often, where do we as a society decide we have some responsibility for what's been created here, particularly victims of domestic violence and other kinds of trauma? When you take a woman that's grown up in a dysfunctional alcoholic family, and then, at age 13 or 14, she's out on the streets with a pimp or something, where do we start saying, wait a minute, society has to take some responsibility for that? Because, why are we not helping this family to be more supportive and functional? And these are so many women that I would meet down the road, and they were, convicted of killing their abusive partner. And, here they are in prison at age 19 sometimes.
And you were in two different prisons, is that correct?
Right. In 2006, I moved down to CIW.
Could you compare and contrast the conditions in each for us?
Yeah, I would readily say that CIW was a much kinder, more collaborative prison. And it was a much older prison. In fact, CIW was the first real women's prison in California. There was a small section as part of another, but it was the first standalone women's prison. And I think because it was a little farther away from the sort of the CCPOA, the guards union base in Sacramento, the guards were much kinder. And so it was also had 2-man cells instead of 8-man cells. I mean, when you think up at Chowchilla, 246 square feet, that's how big the cell is. 8 women in a 246 square foot cell. Yeah. And, the age, socioeconomic differences, one of the first things I did when I was in prison, everybody smoked in prison, and that was before smoking even on prison grounds was prohibited. Women were allowed to go out 10 minutes every hour to the outside, and that's where they would smoke. But most women just smoked in their cells and hoped they didn't get caught. It was a rule that you weren't supposed to smoke in the cell. So here I am, put in a cell with 7 other women, 6 of whom smoked. And I remember going to the very first, I forget what they call it, it's sort of your case review, where the lieutenants and captains review, here's your conviction, here's what the job you're gonna do in prison, here's your case factors, et cetera, et cetera. I remember speaking up at that meeting, and it was considered inappropriate to speak up. You were to be talked at or talked over, but you should be a compliant, quiet inmate and not speak up. But I did speak up, and I said, 50,000 people die every year of secondhand smoke, and I don't want to be one of them until I can get myself out of here. And so I'm going to ask you to please put me in a cell. And by then, it was only a month into my prison stay, but by then I had sort of learned a little bit about how prison works. So I made the effort to find 7 other women in the housing unit where all the cells were, who were non-smokers, and approached each of them and said, how about if we room together? That way we don't have to breathe secondhand smoke. So I gave the members of that meeting a list of, can you house all of us together in one room? And in fact, here's another cell that has only one person in it right now. Just move that one out, move all 8 of us into this one cell, and then we don't have to deal with secondhand smoke. Well, the first thing they said to me is, this is a non-smoking facility and smoking doesn't happen in the cells. And I said, I know that's what your rule is, but you know as well as I know that it does happen. And so here's a simple solution. And we kind of argued back and forth, and the captain said, okay, well, on your way out, give your list to the sergeant sitting there at the desk and we'll see what we can do. Well, what really happened? So, I was hopeful. Oh, this will be good. Now I can. What happened is the prison system moved me into a cell with the most famous drug dealer in the prison system. And it was a message to me to, be careful what you ask for here. Don't step out of line. You're asking for something, and here's what we're going to do. They made no attempt to put me in a non-smoking cell. And so for several weeks, I had to live with, and of course, everything in the prison system is known. So immediately the room that I was put in, they knew I was a non-smoker, and they knew that that I wanted in a non-smoking room. So they made a point of smoking right in front of me and blowing it in my face and all of that. It was a way of saying, don't try and change anything in this system.
Right.
So, it was tough. Eventually at Chowchilla, I was able to create basically a non-smoking room. And that doesn't mean because the minute you have an empty bunk, someone transfers or paroles or something, and you have an empty bunk, the next time a bus arrives, you're likely to have that bunk filled. So what we would do when we did create this non-smoking room is we would tell whoever came into the room, look, this is a non-smoking room. Now, we're not going to tell on you. If you absolutely have to smoke in the room, please just go outside 10 minutes every hour and smoke if you have to. But don't smoke in the room. But if you absolutely have to smoke in the room, then go in the little toilet stall, hang a sheet because there's a vent fan at the top of the toilet cubicle. Smoke in there because we don't want to breathe your smoke, and we'll help you get out, and we won't tell the cops that you're smoking or anything like that. We'll.
That's a creative solution.
Well, it worked. Sometimes it was. Sometimes there were resentments and so forth, but for the most part, it worked. And so we were able to maintain a non-smoking room.
Jane, what year was it, would you say, that it first came on your radar that you could request post-conviction DNA testing? And how did you go about doing that initially?
Again, because I had worked in the law library, I tried to stay up on new laws coming around, and I had seen the new law in I think it was in 2014 or 15 or something, that you could basically, what the law says is if you make a good case to say this testing may help me, the judge really shouldn't deny it. So I wrote my own motion for DNA testing, and really was surprised that I won it. I mean, I wrote it very simply and just said, you have fingernail scrapings, you have one of the murder weapons, neither of which have ever been tested for DNA. test these things. And, it can help me prove my innocence. So what happened is I won that motion. And exactly at the same time is when Loyola Law School Project for the Innocent jumped in on my case. And to be honest, I don't exactly remember when I had written to them asking for help, sometime before that. But I get a letter from them saying, we're interested in your case. And where are you at right now? And, are you represented by an attorney and so forth? Having won the right for DNA testing, the first thing that happened is the DA's, I guess I should back up. I had asked to have those two things, the fingernail scrapings and the rope, tested. And I also by then was wise enough to say, don't use up all of the material that's available for testing. Only use 50% of it in case we have to test again down the road. Because I knew there were sometimes bad things happen. So I asked that, and I asked to not use the San Diego crime lab testing. The judge denied using another crime lab. We had to use the San Diego crime lab, and the DAs didn't respect my wish for only using 50% of the material. But what the DAs initially said is, well, you have to name what type of DNA testing you want. And I said, I don't know. I'm not a DNA
Right.
expert. I don't even know what, you tell me what's scientifically reliable and I'll go along with it. Just give me a name. Well, they wouldn't, and that's when Loyola jumped in and got the testing done, and, none of my DNA anywhere. So, I began to become a little bit hopeful and horrified at the same time, because, I'm thinking, okay, my DNA isn't there now. Doesn't that get me somewhere? Can't you see that you have the wrong person? Anyway.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, you're looking forward to these results. You get the testing, and at least the way it's portrayed by the DA's office is that, there's nothing really meaningful, here in the results. So you were starting to talk about this, but then, so what's going through your mind about how you didn't get this wonderful, result, I guess, after the DNA testing?
I just, by then I was so sort of suspicious of anything that the DAs did or said, and I just didn't know enough about it. I can't, I've said over and over how grateful I was to have an innocence project look like Loyola take over and be able to challenge all of those things in a much more effective way than I was ever able to.
Your case really took on a new life, it seems, when LPI became involved. How hard was it to have them look at your case?
What do you mean, how hard was it to have them look?
Did you have to write them letter after letter, or what was the process like for our listeners?
Well, no, I got, as I was fighting to get the DNA testing done, I got a letter back from them saying, we're interested in your case. And I'm thinking, gosh, this is fantastic. When did I write to them now? I don't really remember, but this is fantastic. Someone is going to maybe be able to help me. And then I don't know exactly how long after that, but I also remember my sister, Bonnie. She had met with Paula and Adam, and I'm not sure who else, because she had a lot of information on my case, and she had talked with them. And I remember I'm in prison and talking with her over the phone, her saying, I really like these people. They're so genuine. They're real people, and I'm feeling so excited about that. And then when Paula and Adam came to meet with me in the prison on a legal visit, I had the same feeling. These are fantastic people, and they genuinely are invested in finding the truth, which was, by then I was so suspicious about whoever even cares about the truth anymore.
So Jane, 19 years after your conviction, you're finally released from prison due to coronavirus. And could you shed some light on what were the conditions like in the prison you were at the time? Were there a lot of people sick? Were they taking appropriate precautions? How scary was that time period for you?
It was really scary. We were hearing on the television about this new COVID virus and how many people were dying of it and how it was, so very contagious and so forth. And masks were recommended. And we, in the housing unit that I was in, we started making our own masks because no masks were provided. And I remember one woman coming back and telling me, the cop told me I have to take the mask off because it might be, you're not allowed to wear a mask in the prison system. It might be considered escape paraphernalia, and then you could get a serious write-up. And
what would you make the masks out of?
A lot of women have material. If you're part of the hobbycraft system, you can have some material if you want to make something. So we just shared within our unit, and we started by making masks. Myself and several other women inside just started making masks out of a little bit of material and rubber bands and so forth. And we handed them out to the elderly first, and anyone else, until we got everybody in the unit a mask. And then eventually the prison system handed out masks to everybody. But at the time, there were so many things that were wrong with the prison system. Finally, the prison system makes the decision they're going to hand out masks, and they're going to make masks, and they're going to have the sewing factory, which was right inside our prison. They sew all of the inmate clothing and so forth. So they're going to have the sewing factory make these masks. And they're going to bring over material from the men's prison, CIM, right across why they had more material, I don't know, or more. Anyway, so the delivery of the material to make all of the masks is brought over, and it's brought over by a non-masked person handling it without gloves. And we already know at CIM, the men's prison, the numbers were astronomical in terms of positive cases. So I'm thinking, wait a minute, you're bringing this stuff over and you're breathing on it, you're touching it with your bare hands, and we're trying to be safe here. Anyway, there were so many things that were just horrifying to me, but we all did get masks. And then when I was released, I knew Paula was going to ask for my release. And she had been very open, saying, it's not likely that it's going to happen. But, the good news is the original Judge Elias, that had been hearing all of the information in the original writ that Loyola put forward for me, I believe that he believed in my innocence. I believe that he could see all of the things that were coming out now. And so he did release me. And at the time of my release, I think there were maybe 10 cases or something at CIW. Within a week, literally, there was 200 cases. And
oh, wow.
It just
dodged a bullet there.
Absolutely.
When you were released, did you feel like you were never going back, or did it just seem like it was temporary?
No, I felt like I was never going back. I felt like I'm absolutely on my way. By then, all of the things that Loyola had uncovered and all of the faith and confidence I had in them, I just knew we were going to win. So I felt like I'm never going back. The challenge of reentry is a major one. So many things happened to me. My identity was stolen while I was in prison, and I had a lot of trouble getting Social Security card. I had no driver's license, no anything. And so to be able to gain an identity was a major task. It was a major task just to get something like simple Medicare. I was 73 when I was released from prison, and to be able to be covered by Medicare, they said, oh, well, you didn't register when you were age 65. And I said, I tried. I sent you letters. I tried to get the prison system to register for me. But of course, I'm a prisoner and all I can use is a phone that will only collect phone calls. So it's not as if I could call Medicare myself. Fortunately, I had kept some track of communication with the prison law office, with other organizations about my attempts to register for Medicare, because I knew that they had a standard that if you don't register at age 65, they will impose a cumulative 10% penalty for each year that you don't register when you're supposed to. And so, here all of this blows up in my face, and Medicare is telling me, you never registered. So A, you're going to have to wait, and B, you're now, 8 years past the time when you should have registered. So that's all going to come out of your Social Security retirement benefits. And I'm thinking, no, this is not right. You can't do it. And that took months of fighting. And eventually I was able to get it and have them understand that I had made an attempt to register.
It just compounds everything. You're detailing a lot of stuff that a lot of people just don't think about, that you're trying to control while you're incarcerated, and then you've got to clean up when you get out. And it's crazy, like the you just mentioned, having your identity stolen while you're in prison. I mean it's like you're being penalized again and again and again.
And apparently that's a relatively common thing, to the extent that now apparently CDCR has put some mechanism into place to search people's identity. Because when you think of it, if someone decides they are going to be an identity thief, what's a better target than an elderly person in prison? Because who in prison is going to check their Social Security records?
What were you feeling when you first got the newest post-conviction DNA results? And were you expecting it would identify a particular person as the killer?
I was hoping, yes. I was hoping we would find something that we could put in the CODIS database, and maybe with a little luck, we'd be able to identify. And so, I knew the DNA testing was going to come back negative. I just didn't know what more we might find out and how much it would be able to help me.
All right, Jane, one of the team members that joined LPI was Mike Cavaluzzi. And he was, kind of the voice in the courtroom during your new preliminary hearing, some of the other hearings. What was your opinion of the job that Mike did, and how good was it to have him on board?
It was great to have him on board. And what was really, really great is to watch the collaboration between Mike and the whole Loyola team. The whole Loyola team would take a portion of the case, whether it's tire track evidence or DNA testing, and each one of the attorneys would comb through everything that we had and basically be able to provide to Mike Cavaluzzi, here's the level of questioning that you should have for their next expert witness. And so it was great collaboration between the Loyola attorneys and Mike Cavaluzzi. He's a very personable person anyway, and he has incredible instincts about how the judge is reading things. He just has great courtroom skills. But he was very well prepared because of Loyola.
Jane, I know that you're continuing and expanding the advocacy work you've been doing all along. Talk to us about what you've been up to since the dismissal of your case. And I understand that you're working on something special with Paula. If you could, please share that.
Yeah, I've been working with the California Coalition of Women Prisoners for about 15 years from within the prison system before I was released. And I would, advocate for women to be their own best advocate in terms of staying up to speed on new laws that were coming around. Things have changed radically within the criminal justice system just in the last 10 years. And it's important for women to be able to have hope and know that there are new laws. So I worked with CCWP, California Coalition of Women Prisoners, while I was inside. And then almost immediately after I was released, they asked me to be part of what they call their coordinating committee. It's like the leadership group within their organization. So I've been doing that. I've been, and what CCWP does is advocate for women prisoners, specific needs of women in many, many ways, whether it's conditions inside, whether it's supporting new legislation, et cetera. Then I've also been a part of the DA Accountability Coalition because, again, this started in LA County when George Gascon was running for office, and the fear was that Jackie Lacey might be reelected. And so we really are going to have to hold DAs more accountable. And, when you look at the power the DA's office has in terms of bringing charges, setting bail, requesting set bail, the judges almost always go along with whatever the DAs request. And so how did we evolve that in this by nature adversarial system between DAs and attorneys, public defenders? Why can't we just get together and look toward the pursuit of truth and justice? How did we arrive that the DA's budget is so much bigger than the public defender's budget, that they have full authority to investigate anywhere and anytime they want, and yet public defenders or any innocence organization, they have to find the money to be able to do a thorough investigation. Somewhere I read that for every $60 a public defender is able to spend to defend you, the DAs have the ability to spend at least $100. So how is that a fair system? So that's what the DA Accountability Coalition is all about.
I'm actually surprised that money gap isn't larger.
I thought you were going to say 1,000.
Right.
It may well. That's an older statistic that I gave you. It might be much larger now. And then, the group that I'm most passionate about is the Los Angeles Innocence Project that has just been created. Eliza and Paula and Paige and Hillary and Aisha. It's first of all, it's a great group of attorneys that have formed this. And secondly, the partnership between the Davis Hertzberg Criminal Forensic Center is, when you think of it, so very important. Because again, this concept of DAs being able to hire any expert and put them on the stand, and then they're an expert witness and they say whatever they want, and the jury says, oh, well, an expert said, so it must be true, without ever really looking into what is the real basis for this. When you look back at things like bite mark evidence or ballistics, or it's so easy for someone to say, well, yeah, that's a match, fingerprint evidence, without really thoroughly investigating. So to have this partnership between the Criminal Forensics Center and an Innocence Project, I think is just fantastic. And I'm really, really excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, and then what exactly is your role, Jane, in the new project?
Policy advisor, just in terms of, what's the best way to go forward in terms of how we help. I've long said there are so many people in prison. Yeah, they're probably guilty of some things. They're not factually innocent, but they've been over prosecuted in so many ways. And how is that fair? How can we find ways to help them also?
So on a lighter note, Jane, since the dismissal of your case, have you been able to get back to your love of horses at all on any level?
Absolutely, I have.
Oh, that's great.
Wonderful.
That's great.
Yeah, in fact, this is the confidence of, before I was released from prison, my daughter actually gave me a horse and said, "This is going to be your horse when you get out, Mom. This is the horse for you." And she was
nice.
Absolutely right. And I've been riding him, and he's just wonderful. He's way more talented than I am as a rider. He can do very high level dressage movements. And most of the time, I don't really know how to cue him accurately. And sometimes he'll look back at me like, lady, just get your act together here. I want to do what you want me to do, but you better give me a clear message. And he's very sweet and he loves me. And so it just has been, it's being able to ride again. And in particular, that first day when I came to Florida to visit my daughter and son-in-law. And my daughter said, Mom, Andre's going to pick you up from the airport and he's going to bring you right to the barn and I'll have the horse all ready. And I said, oh, Claire, it's okay. I might be jet lagged. We can do it the next day or whatever. And she was kind of insistent. No, really, you should. And so there's this funny scene. So that's exactly what I did. I came right from the airport. And sure enough, the horse, Anthem is his name, was all ready. And it was kind of like if you envision a toddler first learning to walk. Here's Claire on one side, Andre on the other, hands out in case mom's going to fall off the horse. And I'm not young, and I don't want to fall off a horse.
Was that the first time you'd been on a horse since all of this?
Oh, yes.
How did that feeling, like just being back on a horse? What was that feeling like?
That was, it was so much more than just riding a horse. It was me recognizing not just the right, but the responsibility to reclaim the life that was stolen from me. It meant so very much to me. And I didn't even realize it at the time. I think my daughter Claire probably instinctively, connected with some cosmic influence there to know how important that was.
She just knew.
But she just knew. And it's been so wonderful for me on so many ways.
That's wonderful. Let me ask one other fun kind of trivial question here, Jane. When you were first released from prison, what was the first meal you wanted to have?
It's so funny that you would ask that because that's what a lot of people ask inside when you get out. What's going to be the first thing you're going to eat? And it was not, the food of it was not that important to me. Although I will tell you, I went with my sister because I was first staying with my sister. And, when I first was released, of course, I was quarantined because of COVID. But then I was able to go to the store with her. And she was, bless her heart, saying, pick up anything you want, put it in the basket. Come on, whatever you want. And I thought, oh, my gosh, I haven't had sourdough bread in more than 20 years. That sounds so wonderful. And then when I brought it back and ate a piece of it, I thought, yeah, it's good. But it's not the end of the world.
I assume you're doing a lot of media these days. What does the future hold for you, Jane?
Well, I feel like the world has to become much more aware of what's wrong with the criminal justice system, and in particular prisons. I really so strongly believe that prisons really do not help anyone. And in saying that, I'll be quick to say, I'm not saying that people don't heal in prison. Many, many people heal, and perhaps having that sort of time out to self-reflect is important. But 6 months worth of a timeout, not 20 years. And so I feel so strongly that there are so many other things that we could do when people do go astray. So many restorative justice sorts of approaches that would be so much healthier and so much cheaper. The prison system, $18 billion is what California's taxpayers are spending on the prison system this year. And we have a recidivism rate of, more than 50%. So what's wrong with this system? How can we continue to do what we're doing and thinking it's a good thing and thinking somehow it promotes public safety? It doesn't. And there are so many other things we could do to promote public safety.
Well, Jane, thank you so much for spending so much time with us today. We really appreciate your, the deep coverage of your ordeal.
Your honesty.
And I think it really helped to shed a lot of light on what we need to fix in the system. So, Jane, pleasure talking to you, and good luck with all your endeavors.
Oh, thank you so much.
Wow. Dion, for some guests, we've got to sort of pull the story out of them and, keep prompting them. But man, oh man, Jane answered all of our questions and then some. I mean, I thought that was a really wild ride, sort of in and out of prison.
Yeah, the details that she provided were really amazing and actually really take you inside, the various jails and prisons that she went through during her incarceration.
Yeah, it gives us a roadmap of how things need to be reformed and why.
Absolutely. For me, the big two reveals, or I wouldn't say reveals, but, important topics that I came away with or left impression on me is probably a better way to say it, was Jane's never ending sense of hope, which I thought was key. She seemed upbeat throughout the process as much as you can be in her circumstances. And the second one is the gamesmanship that the air quotes here, the system played on convicted inmates. And you could probably better detail this than me, but it was the example she gave of the judge sentencing and then that not being honored when they were being processed into prison.
Crazy.
That was absolutely maddening to listen to.
Oh my God, just no continuity in the system. Are people not writing this stuff down, or, and then you,
I don't think so, man. I hate to cut you off, but that's for me, it's like airlines or theaters, it's button seats and you see it. It's the ROI. You have a robust prison population, which means union jobs and more money coming into the system. And it's the most vulnerable in the system that are being played. And that's the only way I can see it.
Yeah, what struck me is how Jane was very adaptable to whatever situation she was in. And she sort of rose as a leader, whether it be figuring out the smoking in the cell thing, or like you say, helping other inmates. And she seemed to be like the go-to person. And
quickly. Usually that stuff takes time, but she came in I just say guns hot, ready to rock and roll and didn't back down from anybody. And sooner or later, it seemed like she was able to, execute whatever she wanted to do.
Yeah, it's almost like if anybody could handle this, it was her. There was just something in her that made her strong enough to be able to adapt. And then another thing I would add is that, as we very often we see in wrongful convictions, I didn't hear bitterness from Jane, which always amazes me. I mean, obviously she's pissed.
Well, how about Hernandez,
right?
Excuse me.
Yeah,
the same way. I'm like, the guy didn't like have a care in the world. I'm like, man, you were locked up for how many years, and he just put it behind him.
Exactly. And, instead what she did is she funneled whatever outrage she had into reforming the system. Yeah. And she's made it her calling to really make sure that this doesn't happen to other people. And, wow, that's really noble. And, she said she started stuff in prison and she's continuing it. She's kept her word.
I hate to put you on the spot, but just what's your take on the kind of whodunit? If she's exonerated, she walks, she's free. So somebody's responsible for her husband's death, right?
Right. So then there's always the question then, is there a safety issue out there, or has there been for 20 years or so?
Right.
And, it may be that we don't know. There could have been other homicides or crimes committed by the same individual or individuals, and we just don't know about it. Certainly like Paula talked a little bit about the mechanics of what some of the other investigation is, but, ultimately it's not the defense's job to solve the case. It's nice. Like, I think with the DNA testing, had a name popped up and you would have nailed somebody, that's always the best result, right? Because you've fixed the injustice and then you've gotten somebody who's dangerous off of the street as well. So we didn't have that here, but the injustice was fixed.
Yeah, I'm hoping sooner or later, people always talk. And I mean, every day we're seeing, crimes from decades ago being solved. I hope it doesn't go that long, but I hope that this one, that Jane will have some closure on who's responsible for her husband's death.
Yeah, and like we always say, the more these cases are discussed in the media and podcasts or whatever, people start coming forward. We had people coming forward. Jane talked about the people who, particularly towards the end of her trial, were saying, listen, we saw Bob on Sunday jogging. contrary to what the police's theory. And there were more people coming forward. And of course, Jane talked about some of the, or I'm sorry, Paula talked about some of the other possible suspects. And the problem is that here's the whole thing about this tunnel vision is if you don't investigate all of those other options, now we've lost 20 some years, right?
That's right.
It's very hard to go back and investigate it. So try as they may, Loyola tried to uncover alternate suspects, but that window may have closed.
Yeah, that was frustrating. Those two that came forward that saw him with a couple people and then a truck, and to not have those run down, you can see how wrongful convictions can take place because all you need is that, one or two eyewitnesses, and it changes the whole dynamics of the case.
Yeah, that's what you see in these wrongful convictions is they just, they
Tunnel
find
vision,
somebody who's
right.
willing to testify, and it changes the whole tenor of the case. Then you throw some physical evidence on there and it's a whole different ballgame. But, I'm quite sure, Dion, that our series on Jane's case is going to generate a lot of thoughts and comments and opinions.
For sure.
And, I hope you'll all share it on social media. Don't be shy. And we always like any kind of interaction you want to give us.
That was a real treat to be able to do a deep dive into Jane's case, Mehul. We really appreciate our fans and listeners and social media followers. We've got some big things planned for the future. So as always, be sure to catch all of our episodes at crimeredefined.com. Until next time, take care, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Crime Redefined podcast. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Crime Redefined. Please send us your comments and questions and join us for the next episode.